Thanks for staying up later. Robert Urich is with us tonight. You, of course, know him as Dan Tanna in Vegas and in Spencer for Hire and many television specials and miniseries. Let's focus on a couple of those miniseries special things. Is it fair to say that Lonesome Dove stands out as the one thing, if you could pick one bit of your work to show people, would that be it?
Well, without a doubt. You know, I grew up in this little tiny town in Ohio playing cowboys and Indians and Zorro and dressing up in all those kind of cowboy outfits. And my uncle across the way, my Uncle John, used to endearingly refer to me as Hoppy, because Hopalong Cassidy was my favorite cowboy. So to finally, after all those years doing all kinds of parts, mostly cops and fathers, and I've done a lot of different kind of roles, it was the first cowboy I got to play. It was probably one of those things you know, when I first started looking at television, at movies, that's what I went to see. So working with the likes of Duvall and Angelica Houston and Tommy Lee Jones and Danny Glover, and as a matter of fact, when CBS aired it for the second time, they did the big promotion again, and it said, Academy Award winner Robert Duvall, Academy Award winner Angelica Houston, Emmy winner Tommy Lee Jones, Emmy winner Danny Glover, Robert Urich. They could have said I was nominated for something, you know, for a People's Choice Awards. But so I was in, you know, it was a kind of a turning point for me personally and creatively, because as much as I had done, you don't know until you play with those big hitters how good you are. And Duvall, not so long ago in an interview, recently said that the moment when I was hung in about the fourth hour, he said it was the most powerful emotional moment of his entire career. It's the moment he points to. I thought, wow, I was part of that moment. And so that's kind of a heady experience.
He was here with us about 6 months or so ago, and we went through the long list of tremendous credits he has, and he focused in on Lonesome Dove. He said it was as good a choice as any, just like you said, and that scene was the scene he talked about. So he holds to the same notion now, and we showed it where you're atop the horse about to be hung, and you spur the horse yourself and get it over with.
But if you see his reaction, is what makes the it's a nice moment for me. But his reaction, they cut to him, and you could actually see the hair stand up on the back of his neck. There was a shiver that went through him that was pretty amazing.
What kind of reaction did you get afterwards to this Jake Spoon character and to the whole Lonesome Dove series?
Well, it didn't give me it did not propel me into any particular elevated area. You know, I didn't get a lot of movie offers after it, and was, I must say, a little disappointed when it was the performance. I mean, everybody was coming up to me, you know, including these other actors, saying, you know, you're just extraordinary in this role. And you ought to get nominated for this. I think you're finally going to start getting recognized. And it just didn't happen. And I don't have hard feelings about it, but sometimes you wonder if anybody is paying attention. And yet there are another group of actors who can do, you know, decent work and good work, but the critics will go on and on and on about them. They're the darlings of the critics. And I'm not, don't get me wrong, I haven't gotten bad reviews in a long time. It may change now after somebody sees this, one of those critics, but it's hard to know sometimes what you need to do to get any attention. Maybe that's not the right way to even go about it, you know. If you concentrate on your work, it ought to be enough, and if you do good work, it ought to be satisfying enough. But the truth is, we don't do that work in a vacuum, and we do need feedback, and we do need people to say, yeah, you know, that was pretty good.
But if you become identified as a TV star, it's hard to break out of that.
Exactly.
You know, if you're Dan Tanna and you're Spencer for Hire, which is not to say that those weren't good performances or good roles or popular television series, but when that gets so much exposure that becomes the predominant impression, it takes a long time to get away from that.
Well, it's the first thing I made a splash with, and I didn't go about negotiating my career and planning certain things, that I would only do these kinds of things so I would be thought of this way. I was this kid from Ohio who went to college and played football and studied acting, but, you know, it's not that we were poor, but we didn't have a lot of dough, and somebody offered me a TV series, not having done too much, and suddenly I thought, boy, this is pretty good, you know?
Yeah.
I'll be able to pay the rent this month, and I got a lot of attention when I did Vegas, and it was for Aaron Spelling, and everybody kind of kicked him around a lot, you know, as being a guy who created cheesecake kind of, you know, a cotton candy type entertainment for television.
There was some validity in that.
Well, yeah, there was. And as a matter of fact, I remember sitting in my living room watching the pilot to Charlie's Angels, and I went, he has finally made the turkey of all time. This is going nowhere. And so, you know, as a matter of fact, I talked to him a couple of weeks ago. We had lunch, and we're actually talking about, there's interested in going back and doing, you know, 2-hour movies of Vegas again.
So would you go back and do it, or would you run the risk? Let's say if you did a 2-hour special, would you run the risk of reinforcing that impression again?
It might, you know, it's been difficult to make that decision because it might be the final nail in the coffin of ever doing serious major motion pictures. I mean, I still think that there's a chance for me to do those kinds of parts. And I get offered movie parts, not every day, but occasionally, but most of the time, they're just not the kind of things I want to spend, you know, several months doing. And, I mean, I recently did a television movie on NBC with Megan Gallagher, who used to be on China Beach and was nominated, and with David Green, who won an Emmy for Rich Man, Poor Man, the director. He won an Emmy for Roots, and he won an Emmy for Decoration Day. And it was a terrific script, and I thought, I would rather do this television movie with these people who are really good than to go out and do this feature in Chicago, and I won't mention some names, but people you would know. I mean, big feature people. And so I've always tried to take the right part, you know, the best of what was offered, and I just like to work.
The role of this Rob Marshall guy in Blind Faith, I thought that was a good one for you because it wasn't so much predicated on action.
Right.
And that he's deceiving not just the authorities, but he's deceiving his own sons, his own family. And you had to show the little subtle ways in which this played itself out as the circumstances changed, and he tried to change his story and calibrate a little bit. And you couldn't do that stuff in a flamboyant way. That was a subtle bit of business.
It took some planning. It was an interesting role insofar as it was the first time I've ever played a character who was, you know, still alive, and it was a real person, and it was a real set of events. And it was brought to my attention by Howard Rosenberg, who writes the reviews for the
LA Times.
LA Times, who's very tough and doesn't like a whole lot of stuff. And he likes some things about it, but mostly he thought that the miniseries, true stories especially, we run the risk of having it become history. So many people in our country don't read today, and so what they see on television becomes the truth for them. And I started thinking about that, so I called him, and I said, you know, I need to talk to you about this review. And he called me. I said, I actually agree with you. And he called me back, and he said, actors never call to tell me they have agreed with the review. So, we discussed this notion, and there are some things about Rob Marshall. I mean, I found out after the fact. I read the script, and I assumed they had documented all of it. And when a cock of an eyebrow can change the truth about a moment, you have to be very careful when you're doing those kinds of stories that really happen. In the movie, the two guys, the wheelmen, who actually pulled the trigger and murdered this woman, get off. I mean, they made a deal with a prosecuting attorney, and they're let go. So now Rob Marshall, my character, is thinking, well, I'm home free, and he's found guilty. Found out later that when the verdict was announced, Rob Marshall collapsed. Paramedics came in with a gurney and oxygen, and he had to be revived and was carried out of the room. I'm going, wait a second, why didn't you tell me this, you know? So it was a peculiar thing, and I got letters from this man in jail, and, you know, protesting that he was innocent, and please convince America that I'm not guilty, and it was very difficult because I didn't know whether he was or not. It was a strange kind of experience.
Shouldn't you have known by one way or another about what happened at that moment in the courtroom?
I'll tell you what, yeah, I should have known, but I didn't. I was relying on his son, his real son who was there, who went through it. Whenever I needed some sort of a blueprint, some emotional and physical blueprint of what happened at any particular time in this story, I'd say, you know, Robbie, what really happened? He said, when the cops walked in, my dad had a drink in his hand. His hands were shaking so badly the ice cubes were clicking. Now, is that a guy who's innocent? Is that a guy who's guilty? I don't know. So I just really took of all these little bits of you know, little details, little hints of what this guy was about, and tried to lace them together as a you know, a character. And I'm not sure it was an accurate portrayal of who Rob Marshall is, really.
So you're happy with the performance from an acting standpoint,
I don't know how accurate it is.
But maybe not with the accuracy.
I'm not sure how accurate it was.
Last season, you were on a show that I thought was a pretty good show. It was in a tough time slot, 10:30 on a Saturday night, American Dreamer with Carol Kane.
Right.
And it was a Gary David Goldberg show, and he now has this critically acclaimed program, Brooklyn Bridge. He's done a lot of quality television. And this one was pretty good, but maybe by circumstances doomed.
Yeah, our show, American Dreamer, was played, it's a half-hour comedy, played at 10:30 at night. It's just not where you play a comedy. But Gary wanted to go on in the fall, and that was the only place for it. But I recently saw, I should not go any further without saying that I'm very proud of that show, and I thought we were trying to do, you know, in a serious, fun way, a show about a guy who was trying to rediscover himself and finding out what's important in his life, and maybe it was a little too serious, but I recently saw Brooklyn Bridge, you know, when it premiered, and so I called Gary and I said, you see, now that's what you know, you're doing the show that I was hoping we were able to create and come up with.
Your character was a pretty high-powered TV journalist. He decides to step away. He's going to go to Wisconsin and kind of scale his life down a little bit after he becomes a widower, and his wife was a camera woman, and she was killed in Lebanon. And an interesting aspect is that he keeps going back to her in flashbacks, and your real wife plays her.
Right, Heather.
Yeah.
Heather was, she was an actress before I could even spell thespian. She was in The Sound of Music when I was in college, and she was 14 years old, and, you know, with Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer, you know, romping across the...
She was one of those little Von Trapp kids?
Yeah, she was one of the Von Trapp. She played Louisa in The Sound of Music, and then did a lot of movies, and she's a terrific actress. And a few years ago, when we had our first child, she decided that she just didn't want to do it anymore, and it's nice to have somebody like that for a partner who really understands what I have to deal with and go through. And just when I think she's almost totally disinterested with not another movie part, and I'll be, you know, fretting and just trying to decide whether I should do something or whether this part is properly written, she'll say something and I'll go, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. And she'll have this insight about, you know, a character or some choice I'm, you know, debating about, and help me. And she's just besides being a great mother, she's a great, great lady.
Did what's known as breaking the fourth wall, the kind of thing that Gary Shandling made a staple of his shows, where you step outside the set and address the audience directly. What did you think about as you looked into the camera? Or did you have somebody stand there just to make eye contact? How did you get into the mindset of addressing these people? Well,
it was really more, for me, it was like Our Town for television, and where the stage manager talks right to, I mean, this person watching right there becomes a character, and you say, hey, I want to tell you something. This is going to be a little embarrassing, but I want you to know something. And you talk to this person, so the camera, the eye of the camera becomes a friend, and you try to become as intimate with that friend, you know, because it's somebody who knows you, and you have to get something off your chest. And so that was always the connection for me. I was sort of telling somebody a secret.
Story of Operation Drumbeat.
On this National Geographic Explorer program, is it a series or just a one-time thing?
Well, I'm hosting the Explorer, the National Geographic Explorer, which is on TBS every Sunday night. It's a series, and Up until now, I've just come into the studio like you do, and I do wraparounds and I introduce films, and I've narrated a couple of films for them. And this is the first show on location, and it's a 2-hour special to commemorate the 50th anniversary of America's entry into World War II. So there's an award-winning film on the mission to sink the Bismarck. I narrated a film on German U-boats, footage never seen before. I mean, I don't know how this got past me, but there were German U-boats that patrolled up and down the Atlantic coast, sank over 400 ships. Thousands of Americans were killed by German U-boats in Maine, in New Jersey, in Jacksonville, Florida, and the government kept it secret for a long, long time. And this producer went to Germany, interviewed these former Nazi submarine captains. There are pictures of the skyline of New York City taken from the bridge of a German submarine U-boat during World War II.
I understand there's
incredible.
There's archival footage of Japanese kamikaze pilots included in this special.
Yes.
The things that you wouldn't think exist. I think most Americans are probably amazed as the 50th anniversary of Pearl Harbor approached to see the footage of that actual attack. It's almost as if a movie crew were there anticipating it. And you see things in flames, and you see men running and scurrying around.
Well, as I visited the Intrepid, they're very proud of that museum, that airspace museum they have over there. And anybody who lives in New York or visits this area has to go there, because it really is it's a museum of patriotism.
Following the lights of Long Island, Hartigan creeps toward the very symbol of American confidence, New York City.
We had never dreamed of seeing New York. We had been at sea for such a long time and only seen water. To suddenly see this splendor, it was fascinating.
Sunday, look for Robert Urich on the National Geographic Explorer special on TBS. That'll be on Sunday night. Thanks a lot for coming by. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Bob.
We're out of here for now. Robert, you've never had more fun?
Had more fun.
What a life you've led.
Kind of situation.
I'm feeling bad for you now. See you later.